We are about to celebrate our second Unai-versary on Thursday, which has been like an Unai-versity for the players. This latest win over Bologna is just another example of the incredible cultural transformation of this football club that no expert would have dared to predict. And this show will be as much about Unai Emery as another Champions League win without conceding. I'm going to get into my coffee because it's a morning record and presented by 24/7 Services. Let's review Villa 2, Bologna 0. Welcome inside the Villa Parlour, Holy Trinity Show headquarters in British Columbia, Canada, totally inspired by childhood nostalgia. Never could I have imagined that I'd be sitting here and watching my club go through a Ron Saunders mid-70s to early 80s type renaissance right before my eyes, because that is what's happening. And many Villa fans will simply not allow themselves to dream big. And that's partially because the outside world keeps saying, oh, Aston Villa, what a lovely story. But it was something Unai Emery said after Tuesday's game that really got the wheels turning. First of all, let's never forget that it actually took 3 gentlemen to completely transform the fortunes of this football club. Our owners bought Aston Villa at its most distressed and depressed. And what great vision they had, because they saw the potential, they saw the opportunity, and they seized on it. What a bargain that looks like now. When I met with Dean Smith earlier this year, he told me that Nassif Sawiris is easily the more emotional of the two. Thank goodness, because 2 years ago last Sunday, he had had enough. His outrage of making a really expensive mistake came to an end, spelling not just the last of Steven Gerrard, but probably Christian Purslow as well. And this managerial merry-go-round system that simply is not sustainable. Now, I've never heard the story of how Nassif Sawiris arrived on Unai in the first place, and it would be awesome to know what those early discussions would have sounded like. Because it was never about money for Unai Emery, in my opinion. It was all about having complete control over the footballing side of the project. And that's a bit of a risk if you're sitting in the owner's chair and you've just spent a fortune blowing out Steven Gerrard and his hopeless entourage after just over a year. But Nassif Sawiris had had enough. And I'd love to know, what did Unai Emery vow to do in the short, medium, and long term? We know both wanted sustained success and improvement. Both wanted Champions League, of course, as the ultimate goal. But who could have imagined after just 2 years, not just achieving it, but then flourishing in it? I mean, just look at this. This is glorious. And I said at the time, we got a sensational draw, but you still have to make the most of it. After the game, Unai Emery used these 3 words to describe the performance: responsible, focused, and mature. And he said the team is maturing, thanks in part to last year's Conference League adventures, which in hindsight almost feel like they were more challenging than the first 3 games in the Champions League. And this word maturing, which is a perfect reflection of his overall leadership style, is perhaps the one attribute that is the most important aspect of our club right now and why we should all be so excited. Unai Emery is a refined, worldly gentleman. You know, he's a restaurant owner, right? So he knows what a good cheese and wine and a ripened olive should taste like. I mean, he loves the finer things in life. And for him, the finer things include football. It's not just a sport, it's an obsession. And it's been handed down to him almost like a family legacy. The way he dedicated the young boys' win to Gary Shaw just shows how he gets it. And a great example of his leadership style is how he's dealt with John Duran along with his entourage. Mature, tactful, long-term. Would, say, Vincent Kompany have dealt with Duran the same way? Well, Not if you watch the Mission to Burnley documentary. The reason why Unai Emery will not leave us until trophies are won is because he's been given the keys to our kingdom. And he earned those by reputation before he even arrived. Now, he has those keys for life. And even though the clickbaity, bottom-feeding media in England always try to give him the Manchester United job, there's no way he would take that because they can never give him what he has with us, and that is autonomy. It's the football department straight to the owners. Manchester United has too many cooks in the kitchen, too many middling managers, and now we have the perfect structure. Unai Emery straight to the owners, Chris Heck on the business commercial side, straight to the owners. The two complement each other, business and football, but they don't mix. Let's get to the game, and there will be more Unai talk to come because of the tactical nuance to it. But I'm going to try and narrow down the three key issues or moments that defined Villa 2, Bologna 0. Alex Dutton, our senior correspondent by day, and a Tarka guitar legend by night. Yet to see Villa concede a Champions League goal live like many others. And although there wasn't the same emotion in this game as Bayern for so many reasons, the atmosphere at Villa Park was still crackling, even from my vantage point from 7,500 miles away on my couch, or sofa, or Chesterfield, or whatever you call it. The key numbers would infer a closer game than maybe what the eyeballs told us. I'd still like to see us be more clinical in hitting the target when we get within range, but some credit has to go to the visitors because they were organized, they were hard to break down. They did have the better early chances, and both teams had some success using the long ball. But I think the work rate and the discipline of Bologna actually forced us to cover more ground in this game, which is reflected in the distance covered stat. Because often, we rest in possession, leaving us less kilometers in our collective odometers, but not on this day. I realize I probably didn't give our Italian adversaries the context they deserved during my Fulham show because last year's sensational season came under the stewardship of Thiago Motta, who of course was then poached by Juventus in the offseason, and then Bologna had two major outgoing sales in Calafiori to Arsenal and then Xerxes to Manchester United. Now, by bringing in Vincenzo Italiano, who's a very talented and successful coach, he brought a brand new style, the man-to-man system, which is a lot of new things to have to absorb in just a few short months. Big issue, obviously, squad selection. The manager made 4 changes, but all of them were logical and stable. John McGinn for Jacob Ramsey. Totally different types of players, but we know what John McGinn can provide along with his leadership. John Duran for Ollie Watkins is a luxury. It's not some kind of downgrade. You could argue that bringing on Maatsen for Dean the way Luka Dean's playing right now might be a downgrade, except that Maatsen is an incredible footballer who helped Dortmund to a Champions League final campaign last year. And by bringing in Ezri Konsa, we were able to keep stable the Pau Torres-Diego Carlos relationship, which would end up paying huge dividends for us. And now we still have lots of gas left in the tank for just the next biggest game this Saturday. At the risk of repeating myself, Ian Matsson's ability to get forward is both exhilarating and unpredictable in a good way. But what's truly eye-popping is his defensive recovery quality. So many times it looked like Bologna had a chance, and then all of a sudden, meep, where'd he come from? And there he is. I'm so glad he got 90 full minutes under his belt to show everybody what he was capable of, because right now we have quite the luxury at the left back position. It's like, well, I'm going grocery shopping. Do I take the Bentley or I take the Rolls? I guess it depends on which one has more petrol in the tank. Big moment, the early Martinez save. You know, we looked a little bit vulnerable in the early stages of that game. And if you're the opposing manager, how would you draw up a game plan to exploit whatever weaknesses Aston Villa may have? And I think the logical answer is probably attacking the space between Diego Carlos and Ezri Konsa, which Bologna did, leading to a chance in the 7th minute. Thankfully, Emi Martinez was sharp and all over it. And also, thankfully, there was no Bologna player in the rebound location to sweep up those crumbs. But by halftime, 3 attempts on target each, and Bologna had the only big chance created. So that early save did kind of help stabilize us a little bit. I'm not going to pile on Leon Bailey. I'm not going to pile on Leon Bailey. I'm not going to pile on Leon Bailey. You thought he was getting dragged at halftime, didn't you? Because at halftime, his numbers were as dire as those at Fulham. But what does the manager do? Nothing. Shows faith in a very important player for us who, during his Aston Villa career, has been streaky, and Unai Emery believes the good streaky is just around the corner. Once again, mature, responsible, individual player management. Intense but very poignant moment that kind of exemplifies the theme of this show. Unai Emery having a go at Austin McPhee over defensive set-piece duties late in the game. Bologna had a corner, they hit the post, and a couple of minutes later, with I think a minute left on the clock and Villa leading 2-0, our manager is tirading with McPhee over the details there. And this is why Aston Villa is going to keep improving and why we will never settle on standards. And so he should. Although McPhee didn't see it coming and looked rather bewildered during it. I hope by this point in the show I've established what a dramatic, transformative effect Unai Emery has had on Aston Villa Football Club in just 2 years' time, which means that every new game is more exciting for us supporters. Now, 24/7 services can have the same dramatic, transformative effect on your home, your office, your recreational property, but it's not going to take you 2 whole years. In fact, the way painter Jay goes about his business, it might take you 2 days. Jay knows his way around with a brush, and he's hanging paper as well. Wallpaper never went out of style. It's actually quite a popular and cost-effective way of dramatically changing your space, kind of like this recent project Jay has been involved with. Kind of like Unai, the hardest part is actually having the vision in the first place before you go out and get the materials to do the job. And this is where Jay the painter comes in, because he's gifted. He had a little paint roller in his crib when he was little, and he can visualize those colors and those color combinations, which can literally change your mood. Now, I've shown you on the show a lot of bathroom and kitchen renovations. And incredibly, it's now 2 months until Christmas Eve. That's how close we are. Why not give yourself a gift this year of an Aston Villa-like transformation in your own gaff that you can enjoy for the whole year through? You can browse some other projects on the 24/7 socials, or you'll find those on the website under projects. And you'll also get the gateway to your new gaff with the phone numbers, which you can find in the description of this video. Big issue number 3, the tactical test. This was a very intriguing watch by virtue of the fact that our opponent played this man-to-man system. And the best coaches in the world are the ones who can simplify the game for their players. And Unai Emery does that well, simplifying to its core the objective. We are either going to go around, through, or over our opponent. And Unai Emery likes to go through the opponent. And it just so happens, partially by design and by recruitment, we have the perfect players to accomplish that objective, either by winning your duel and beating that first man who gives you the pressure, or through little combinations that get you into those spaces. I've coined the phrase on this show, the McGinnian spinorama, where he spins away from somebody, sometimes using his pronounced seat as leverage, before either drawing a foul or creating something as he drives forward. Tielemans and Barkley have a very clever way of showing one thing and then deceptively pivoting and beating that first man into space. Onana can do it. Boubacar Kamara can do it. What a sight for sore eyes he is. A brand new quality signing for us. And then a little farther forward in midfield, you have Morgan Rogers wriggling away from everybody and also driving the space. Unai Emery inherited McGinn and Kamara. Everybody else they signed. You have the master with the vision, then you go get the materials through recruitment. You may have noticed how many times we played intricate little combinations to get past that first wave of pressure or that first man. And really the only complaint I might have is that I thought we overpassed at times in the front third, but that was partially down to how defensively disciplined Bologna were. Still though, if there was one regret after this game, it's that the scoreline wasn't wider because we created a landslide of great situations. Unai Emery's job is to look at the opponent, see the weaknesses, come up with a game plan, but after that, it's up to the players to finish those chances. And when we couldn't combine or just beat that one man on our own, there were our two center backs making sublime long-range passes. I mean, Pau Torres was Pau Torres. Diego Carlos on Tuesday was simply outstanding. Both of them completed 95% of their passes. And doesn't it just feel like Torres and Carlos are in their element somehow in Champions League? But you'll have noticed that on several occasions, with long passes, the two of them just sliced through Bologna's midfield. I mean, carved them up like they were Halloween pumpkins. A long ball is considered any pass of 20 yards or more. And between the two, Torres and Carlos completed 9 of 12 long balls, which is 75%, which is really good and way above average. And many of those went right through the most congested part of the field, many of them on the ground. One of them, though, went over and led directly to a goal. Big moment number 2. John versus John. I mean, this is what you call a marquee matchup. Big striker in fine form, lots of buzz. Big defender, also in fine form. Both Colombian internationals who were teammates just last week in a 4-0 win over Chile, where John Duran scored. Can you imagine the messages and the banter that was happening between those two in the lead up to this game? Oh, there's no chance you're scoring. Oh, I'm going to get you, bro. And for the most part, it looked like Lukumi had the upper hand until the 64th minute. And it was Diego Carlos's accurate long ball that started the sequence. Morgan Rogers actually technically starts it because he makes the break, but Carlos clocks it. It's a 49-yard ball. Afterwards, Morgan Rogers manages to isolate the defender and get him standing still, and that's when he knows he's got him, because Morgan Rogers knows, I just got to hook a ball into the general region of John Duran and something good will probably happen. And there we had it, our John versus John matchup in the box, and our John got the better of it with a fantastic strike. And imagine the texts and the banter now after the game. And I said earlier, the game is simple. You go around, you go through, you go over. Isn't it great to have the players who can do all three? The long ball was always Diego Carlos's bread and butter, and here it leads to the insurance goal. And shortly, almost immediately after scoring, John Duran was substituted. And that's when we got to see the chaotic Colombian's petulant side once again, where he kicked a chair and made a little bit of a fuss. No fuss from Unai Emery, although one of the coaches, I think it was Rodri, went over and had a word. But afterwards, Yuri Tielemans just sloughed it off and laughed about it, as did Unai Emery. He's got them right where he wants them. He's got a striker who is not satisfied with just one goal and just 65 minutes work. And the number one big moment that defined Villa 2, Bologna 0. McGinn the net. It's McGinn the net. You see, the first goal was always going to be huge in this game, and there was some controversy in the lead up to this goal because the Bologna players and their manager felt that Ezri Konsa fouled Fabian in the sequence just prior to Konsa getting fouled himself. Now, when I watched it again, it sure looked like Konsa was being held back, and then he slipped as he released the ball. I'm not sure how he's supposed to avoid the collision there. And then Konsa gets fouled by Freuler, and Freuler gets booked for it. That precedes a kerfuffle on the sideline, which ends with a very classy handshake between managers. And then up steps John McGinn. This is approximately 45 yards from goal, and McGinn knocks it all the way in. Now, did he mean to score? I think he meant to try to get it as close to target as possible, where any glancing touch turns into a nightmare for a goalkeeper, but in the end, it didn't need a glancing touch. If you ask a goalkeeper which ball they hate dealing with the most, it would be this one, because it's horrendous. You have everybody bearing down on you, and you kind of have to play for that late redirection. And when it doesn't come, and it hops right in front of you on the doorstep, it's too late by then. So whether this was intentional or not, it's still a pearler of a ball from John McGinn, and wasn't it great to have our captain back? I mean, his ability to turn into midfield and escape danger was perfect for this game plan, but we often forget that McGinn has ability from the dead ball. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer was really hard to choose again, which is a great sign, but you know what? Ezri Konsa completed 36 of 37 passes. That's a 97% average, and that's the highest of anybody on the park. He won 4 of 5 duels, both ground and in the air combined. He had a block, he had a clearance, he created a chance, and he earned the foul that led to McGinn's goal. I'm pouring Ezri Konsa the Holy Trinity Ale, which happens to be Drifter Nick's new favorite beverage, a proper amber nectar, at just $3.95. That is fantastic value for flavor. And by the way, people are starting to realize that the Sill Hill Tap Room is an optimal pre- and post-game hangout. Maybe you should try it prior to Bournemouth. Have some great beverages and save money for other things. With that game in the bag and now behind us, another great week could conclude with a win against Bournemouth on Saturday. And Anthony Areola's team will be flying high because they beat Arsenal 2-0 at home last weekend. So it's another battle of Basque managers. That's the third for us already this season. Now, you'll recall last year, late in the season, we beat Bournemouth to finish off a great week that started by winning at Arsenal and then winning on penalties at Lille. But at that point of the season, we were already starting to be battered and bruised. And it was Morgan Rogers who scored a really important goal in that Cherries game after falling behind on a penalty that kind of got us going. Now it feels like we're all just fresh as a daisy. Amadou Onana's halftime substitution was tactical, according to Unai Emery, even though he has been managing some pain. But it's a matter now of playing the players, the horses for the courses that are next in front of us. And this is probably going to be the kiss of death, but, you know, Bournemouth's away record over this past calendar year has not been very good. I mean, they came back incredibly to beat Everton 3-2 at Goodison in that wild game, but beyond that, it's been a struggle for them. No Dominic Solanke for us to worry about either, but I find that Semenyo is a handful, and Tyler Adams is fit again. I rate this player because he has an engine on it. It's already a great time of year. Fall, Halloween is imminent, which is always fun, but what a time to be an Aston Villa supporter. Don't you feel like this Villa bandwagon that's hurtling down the motorway is gaining new passengers as lapsed Villa fans are suddenly reignited by this group? And I say it to you all the time, I try so hard to savor all of this, the build up to it, the actual games themselves, doing these shows, because right now Any opponent that comes our way, I feel optimistic about it. And that's all we can really ask for. Until Bournemouth, be well, and where's my coffee cup? And as always, up the mighty Villa!